Okay, welcome back then. Late October 1862, and I think it goes without saying, a tough round, a really, really tough round, and the loss of a central figure really in the campaign so far, which in real life has been running about 6 months, in game time 12 years, and it's certainly something we're going to have to sort of take stock of the loss and sort of see what ramifications it has for the campaign. I mean, of course, Omar Pasha was always going to depart, as at some point in the campaign he was going to die, I think, in real life, probably in the 1870s. But yeah, he's been a central figure really. I think without Omar Pasha, the first war against Russia would have been almost impossible, really. I mean, he enabled us to kind of weather that storm, and really the second war also. The first Austrian war. We quickly realised he was a central figure in that war. I mean, at the beginning of that war we had three-star generals, which was Omar Pasha, Hussein Avni, Abdul Karim Nadir, located in the sort of Bosnian Eliat. And both Abdul Karim Nadir and Hussein Avni were very green at that time. They had only just received their commissions as 3 stars, and we came to depend on Omar Pasha also in that campaign, in the significant battles around Zagreb, and then securing ultimately central Hungary. And of course it was Omar Pasha's command that took Vienna for the first time in our history, a significant event. And although in this war we have had a much larger army, a much broader kind of staff command, most of the really significant battles involving multiple forces, Omar Pasha has taken, if you like, theatre command of those battles. Not always, but often, because he's the most senior of the 3-star generals that we have. And sort of ironic when you consider that he's been involved in battles involving hundreds and hundreds of thousands of men, sometimes 500,000 or 750,000, and yet he kind of, when he kind of catches it, it's in Kavala at a battle involving sort of relatively small forces. In the greater scheme of things, it's a battle where he actually has a numerical advantage over his opponent. The Austrians only have, shade under, it's not a small battle, but they have, about 70,000 men. And also the Austrian force is already fairly shattered under von Benedek. It's comprised of forces that are cobbled together from their failed attempt to besiege Adrianople, plus forces that fall back from Salonika. But yeah, history has no darlings, and it doesn't matter how good a general you are if you repeatedly lead armies into battle again and again and again and witness the deaths of hundreds of thousands of men. Probability alone means that there's a good chance your lifespan will be shortened, and that has happened for us with Omar Pasha. We have to keep a sense of proportion a little bit, a kind of sense of perspective. Omar Pasha was a great general, and certainly by the end of his life, his stats were kind of god tier. I mean, he was in a league of his own, and I would posit that he could have engaged any Austrian commander, and even if that Austrian commander had a force that was twice the size of his own, he would have probably defeated that Austrian commander. He was just that good. But the mythology surrounding great commanders in game, as in real life a little bit, can become a bit of a self-fulfilling thing, which is to say that if you have a fairly junior commander, as Omar Pasha was when he was a 2-star general, he was just a prospect, really, he was a slightly above average prospect. But they do really, really well in a particular battle, as he did, for example, in the engagement at Rumelia in the Russia War, and, by all accounts, he should have lost. Often you'll then use that general more and more. They will accrue much more experience. And in our specific case, we only really had one army in the European command in the Russia War, and it was led by Omar Pasha. So he was kind of running around, putting out fires left, right, and centre, really, engaging the Russians in endless battles, and accumulated a huge amount of experience through his many, many engagements. And it just meant that by the end, he was truly a kind of colossus. He really was a great general. And he bequeaths us a functioning army, really. It's really Omar Pasha that kind of that forges the concept of the Nazim el-Jadid, the new model army, into something that is working. It is a working model. And the traditions of our new field command are his traditions, the traditions that he kind of bequeaths us. And we do have, a couple of pretty good generals at the moment. I mean, we've got a relatively experienced staff command, but if you look at the case of Hussein Avni Pasha, he's a kind of a slow burner, really, when compared to Omar Pasha. I mean, he received his commission somewhat later, but in this war, he is maturing as a pretty serious commander in his own right. In addition to Hussein Avni, in the south, just on the back of the Egyptian victory, Mehmed Ali Pasha, he only received his commission this year. As a 3-star, is given his own independent field command, and he's done really, really sterling work in Egypt. Now, for a sense of proportion, Mehmed Ali Pasha has pretty much almost the same kinds of stats that Omar Pasha had when he was promoted to a 3-star general. Keep in mind that Omar Pasha, when he was promoted to a 3-star general, was principally an offensive commander. He wasn't really a great defensive commander. He became a very good defensive commander on the basis of experience. But he was, for the most part, an offensive commander, and that kind of suited our style of warfare, which was to use fortifications, citadels, and placements to kind of, pin enemy forces into place, wheel our forces around, get force concentration, and conduct counter-offensives. And so having an offensive commander really favoured us, because we would tend to conduct offensives and select the ground and the conditions for us to kind of engage in battle. So Mehmed Ali is a general that's very, very similar to Omar Pasha, and probably what we'll be looking to do is get him back into the European theatre, and we'll be giving him command of Omar Pasha's former command, the 1st Army. Namik Ali, the 2-star general, Lieutenant General, will retain command of the Imperial Guard. Now, of course, the game bug recreates Omar Pasha for us, but it's not really Omar Pasha in more ways than one. It recreates Omar Pasha as a kind of Lieutenant General, a 2-star general, who is, in truth, just a good prospect. And as in real life, sort of as the game as in real life, really, these great generals, they're made. It's not in their DNA. They're not hard coded to be great generals. So we're going to call Omar Pasha, of course, the newly spawned Omar Pasha, Bayezid Pasha, in order for this not to be immersion breaking. He is a student of Omar Pasha from the 1840s in the Imperial Army College, and he is a good prospect. He's got similar characteristics to Omar Pasha, as he would have as an understudy. And the truth is, it's more than likely that Bayezid Pasha may just remain a fairly good prospect. Maybe he does receive a promotion to a 3-star general. Maybe he becomes a better than competent 3-star general. Maybe he does emerge as a great general in his own right. But sadly, though, it won't be, because it would be great if he respawns and somehow has a second life. But unfortunately, again, the game as in real life doesn't allow for that. The newly kind of promoted Bayezid Pasha, then, in Constantinople, we have plans for him. He is going to be sent to take command of our force in Aden. This is because he's a new commander. He's got pretty decent stats. He's a pretty aggressive kind of commander, tactician of Elan, a strong disciplinarian, and this gives him an opportunity to kind of develop his kind of ability without the fetter of a chain of command. So we want him to go to Aden, develop himself, and find himself there, I think. This will relieve Zarif Mustafa Pasha, who's a 3-star general. He will be now really needed in the European theatre, because the loss of Omar Pasha doesn't just mean the loss of a really capable general and an interesting personality who's been seminal to the campaign so far. In just purely practical terms, it means that we have lost 3 generals in almost as many months. In fact, in slightly less, in about 2 months. 2 generals were, I believe, lieutenant generals who were under Omar Pasha's command. They have left service, they've retired, and of course the death of Omar Pasha means we're now shy of 3 generals. That is significant. That's not good. And the hope is, in order for our planned operation on the Dalmatian coastline to come off next year, we need to somehow magic up a 3-star general, to tell you the truth. It could still be doable, but it would be really touch and go with the command structure that we have in place. So the plan is Omar Pasha, then Omar Pasha's, I should say, his protege, Bayezid Pasha, he goes to Aden. Zarif Mustafa Pasha comes back to the European theatre. Mehmed Ali Pasha is given command of the 1st Army. That's the first kind of order of the day, really. Omar Pasha's former command then is going to be set to evade combat, and we're going to bring these boys back to Adrianople. His command is in slightly ropey shape. We're going to get him inside the citadel. He needs to receive reinforcements and supplies and so on, and await. Who is he awaiting? God, there's too many generals. Oh, and await. Mehmed Ali Pasha from Egypt. So that's really all we're going to do in the short term. What we are going to do is detach Mehmed Ali, get him to set to riverine points, and we're going to get him to Adrianople as fast as possible. That's 15 days. We'll settle for that. And in terms of his command then, we're going to begin bringing his command back. Now, I think to begin with, we're going to remove, if we can, okay, 5 days, that's good. We're going to really remove the support elements of his force. With a cavalry division, we might also be able to move using riverine points. "17 days. Right, we'll do it, that's fine. The reason being is Mehmed's Marauders is going to be kind of folded up as a command for the most part, which is to say that we're going to have to now detach all of the service asset units, the artillery and the supply trains, and attach them to the 6th Army, which is in the process of being constructed. So the 6th Army will be given to Abdul Karim Nadir. It's comprised a corps in Constantinople, which is complete, which is this year, like the first corps. We've got another corps, which is, I think, constructed now in Ankara. Let's stick these guys on rails. And I tell you what, let's just actually construct this corps in Sofia. It makes more sense to do that. Yeah, 6 days, that's good. And then enter the structure. I don't think we can move this corps this turn. No, we can't. We'll have to wait. And the 3rd corps is in Sinop. Yeah, in the process of being constructed. So that's 3 corps, plus a cavalry division, which will arrive in Smyrna in 17 days, plus the service asset units, which have been detached from the old 7th Army. But yeah, we're going to start bringing our force back from Egypt now. The mission in Egypt is a success. It's kind of mission accomplished kind of thing. In terms of what we do in the European theatre in the short term, not much, frankly. I think for the time being, we're going to sit tight. We've got the Italian sort of volunteer force, which is really a skeleton force comprised of officers and some guns at this point. That's being brought back to Sofia. And yeah, that's pretty much it, to tell you the truth. The only thing we are going to do in Aden is we're going to conduct an offensive north with Zarif Mustafa Pasha's force to lift the siege at Sana. This is pretty much going to be his last independent action, I would imagine. After this, we're going to get him back to Aden and, yeah, get him sent to the European theatre, switch him out with Bayezid Pasha. The fleet, or at least half of the fleet, is conducting a blockading action in the Adriatic. The remainder of the fleet is in Constantinople, receiving supplies and replacements. And probably in late October, we're going to send that force to the Mediterranean trade box to conduct probably escort role, I think, for our Mediterranean commerce. That's pretty much it. Trade has been set for this term. I'm going to double check that, make sure our exports have been set. Now, one thing that we do have to kind of keep in mind is that we have an economic crisis inbound. It's begun in Prussia. And yeah, we don't know when it's going to arrive, what intensity it's going to take. But we don't have any inflation at the moment. We do need to keep an eye on that. It's going to result in inflation, which is going to drive up costs. That includes state costs. So we have to keep it in mind. One thing that we might look to do to kind of mitigate that is, I've been thinking about how we might do this. We could do this as a long-term thing. We've got a large enough economy that we could absorb this now. We want to try and look for ways to convert some of the private wealth that we have into kind of state revenue without increasing taxation, which puts pressure on kind of, I suppose, kind of public goodwill, you know, support for the regime, and this kind of thing. And it depends what kind of form of taxation as well. Some kinds of taxations, like tariffs and quotas on trade, tariff taxes, which is already quite high. We've already got a fairly heavily insulated economy. That puts strain on foreign relations, so we don't want to increase that too much. But the idea is, we're going to start looking to import gold. We're not going to sell the gold. We're going to pretty much stockpile a huge amount of gold in our economy for a rainy day. And it's going to take a bit of time. Demand for gold outstrips supply, but the idea is that gold will be set to conversion once we need state revenue. It's going to be a way of, I suppose, it's kind of the equivalent of encouraging our ruling class, the capitalists, the industrialists, to begin kind of converting their wealth into gold and storing it in a state bank. And the idea is that will allow us to kind of convert private capital into state revenue. Now, if we do that en masse, it will generate inflation. We're going to have inflation soon anyway on the basis of economic crisis. The idea is we have a kind of reserve of gold that can allow us, if kind of state costs run out of control, we can begin to convert that, and that will top up our tax revenue. So we've got a bit of a plan for that. We're not going to do it just yet. It's something we kind of got in the pipeline, but we are going to be doing that. In terms of exports, imports, there's nothing else to really do this turn. We've got our export set, we've got our import set. What we are going to do actually is we are going to look to export some manufactured goods, because we've got quite a good stockpile of manufactured goods now. Steel is okay. Yeah, all of the kind of strategic resources, coal, things like this, they're all kind of pretty good. The remnants of the force that was defeated at Kavala is now at Salonika. It really is just a kind of token force. At some point, we are going to look to kind of deal with that. What we'll probably do is, when we've been the kind of teeth arms of Mehmed Ali's force back, we'll probably land it in Salonika to provide a kind of permanent security, and that 7th Army will be properly assembled at Salonika. That's the idea. We do need some kind of permanent security there. But yeah, that's it. That's really it for now. There's nothing else to kind of do this turn. So yeah, heavy kind of turn. We have to roll with it. We mourn, tomorrow. We've got business to do today. But it is a heavy loss, and yeah, it's quite something after 6 months in the campaign to lose such a central figure. A real surprise. And it just goes to show that, in warfare, you can never get kind of too comfortable. The hope is we don't lose any other generals in the short term, and for the time being, we've got a fairly stable kind of disposition in central Hungary. We're going to look to hold this position for the time being, and at some point soon, we're going to be looking to conduct a counter-offensive into Plevna. Nothing too soon, however. We want to try and get our 6th Army in the field. Keep in mind that Abdul Karim is just commanding an ad hoc force at the moment. So yeah, it's not really a proper force. So he will be given ultimately the command of a proper force in the next month or so. So that's it. Going to put you on pause. We'll pass turn, and we'll see you in early November. Okay, welcome back then. Early November 1862, and well, the economic crisis has arrived in the Ottoman Empire pretty much straight away. We kind of we catch the flu before most other people. So it's affected a whole range of powers. It begins in Prussia, of course, Germany, and has arrived here. Instantly, this knocks 5 national morale. That's not too bad in terms of intensity. And straight away, we actually get 5% inflation, but 1% is removed. Economic sunrise, inflation lowered by 1 point. So straight away, we get almost a kind of partial recovery. We have a fairly healthy, fairly robust economy that's shown really strong growth for really 12 years now. So the hope is we can weather this storm without any kind of serious problems. We have noticed a complete emptying out of private capital pretty dramatically. Fortunes have been lost. And if we look at the economic reports, also exports have pretty much halved overnight. Domestic market sales remain relatively healthy. But yeah, exports have dropped significantly, and we actually have well, in terms of the total number of merchandise, it's a kind of trade balance. Although we make slightly more on exports than we sort of spend out on imports, so that's interesting. But yeah, it begins. This will, make everything more expensive. The maintaining of our army more expensive. The construction of new economic enterprises. So we're going to hold off to any kind of outlays for the time being. The main thing is, the economy's kind of okay. We don't want to lose any more private capital, so we'll just kind of keep an eye on things. And I think for the most part, the economy is kind of still profit making. It's still growing. It's not contracting. So we're not kind of in inflation. We're not kind of we're not in kind of like a massive recession just yet, but it remains to be seen. We'll see what happens. In terms of military actions in the last round, then a few significant events. So the first one is the Austrians assault Plevna. This time they take the town. We lose 16,000. Many of them are prisoners. We inflict 8,000 casualties. On the back of that, the Austrians also press down into I think what appears to be, yeah, they're actually in Sofia. So there's a fairly big action at Sofia, involving a fairly large portion of the Austrian army, about 343,000. Our combined force that we could bring to muster in central Bulgaria at this time is about 500,000 men. Not big casualties on either side really, but it's we inflict 25,000 casualties, take sort of just out of 15 of our own, and it's a victory, but it feels more like kind of tentative sort of Austrian prodding of that position at the moment, and they are bringing more forces south. So we'll see what happens. I think in the next kind of the next 14 days. For the time being, we're going to stay on the defensive. Our intention is to hold this position in central Bulgaria and really look to kind of engage the Austrians in a defensive posture, where we kind of have dug-in bonuses and this sort of thing. It's early November. The weather's actually quite good in the Balkans at the moment, or at least this part of the Balkans. But yeah, we don't want to engage any kind of, don't want to do anything too risky. We want to kind of keep our kind of dug-in bonus and see where we go with it. What we are going to do is out the Grenadier, we're going to deposit one of these forces, then probably the Hungarians, put them into Sofia. And the corps that arrived, we're going to be constructing the 6th Army. So one corps has arrived, we're going to deposit that force into his command. We have an additional corps in where? Constantinople. Let's get these boys up into Sofia. 3 days, happy with that. And then we've got a 3rd corps that's in the process of nearing completion in Sinop. Now we've got the cavalry division. That's 2 days away from from Smyrna. Once they're there, so I suppose it'll be in late November, we'll stick them on rails also and move them to Sofia. And then the remainder of the 6th Army is really the kind of support formations of what was formerly the 7th Army. So we're going to get this force moved back, I think probably also to Smyrna, or maybe Constantinople. 17 days. I'll tell you what. 12 days. 13. Yeah, we don't really need to deposit the. They'll just move into port basically, so we need to unload them. Right. Yeah, I think for the time being, at some point we are going to have to send a force to kind of deal with the remnants of the kind of sort of southern Austrian army that's still kind of plaguing us, besieging Salonika. There's nothing we can really do about it in the short term. We have to really wait for the Austrians. What we'll probably do is, well, Mehmed Ali has arrived in Adrianople. Let's give him command then of Omar Pasha's former force. Okay, that's good. We'll keep this force in Adrianople for the time being to receive supplies, replacements and such. And where are his command points? Yeah, he's a good aggressive strategist. So Mehmed Ali is a really good prospect as a kind of 3-star superstar. We'll see though. May not happen. Like, again, it doesn't always happen the way we want. But yeah, he's a good aggressive strategist. He's in command of a really experienced force. Of course, Omar Pasha's own command. But it's going to have to sit tight for the time being, I think, in Adrianople. And the idea is to hold our position, hold our screen to the north. Once the first army under Mehmed Ali has basically kind of got its replacements, got its supplies, and it's kind of its administration in order, is we'll conduct a march through Kavala to finally lift the siege in Salonika. And that will then provide the platform for landing the teeth arms of the 7th Army in Salonika. And then we can begin constructing forces around that, an additional cavalry division, some artillery, so on and so forth. And that command, which will be in Salonika, will be given to Saif Mustafa Pasha, who incidentally just successfully lifted the siege at Sana, which is good news, and that's the final action, and completely destroys the Yemeni force there. So that's kind of a welcome development. I think from here, 28 days. think we'll keep him in Sana for the time being. And there's a Yemeni force. Oh my god, and the Yemeni force has taken Aden. Oh Christ, I didn't even see that. Well, that's really bad news. Because that's our base of supplies. How the hell did that happen? I mean, they had a fortress. Yeah, very bad news indeed, that. We don't lose any national morale from it. I guess we lose, what, 85 prestige. Yeah, that's not good. I can only assume that it was a kind of revolt that was kind of so dramatic. I didn't see the report of that, though. Let's have a look. So, I mean, when Bayezid arrives, really, he's already got his hands full, kind of thing. That's good. One of the militia regiments has been trained to regular quality. Yeah, your men are revolting against our rule. Several places. I think if there's one thing that Yemen has definitely proven, it's the limitations of kind of de jure protectorate status. It's not panned out as we would have wanted at all, and this is a huge embarrassment. And another great expense, because we have to reconstruct a fortress, all of the kind of, commercial instrumentation that we had there, the trade post, the mission, and all of this kind of thing. Not good news at all. I think we're not going to outlay anything else. We're going to just hold tight for the time being. But yeah, that's another setback in the kind of ongoing colonial war, which has been going for some years now, of course. Let's quickly check our colonial penetration then in Kuwait. We've got colonial merchants there. What we're going to start doing is conducting kind of naval displays. We can't do that. Where is... Where is the Persian Gulf Fleet? I'm asking myself. Ah, it's there. Okay, fine. Okay, well, let's get them into the Persian Gulf. Now, it had previously been the case that we could conduct gunboat diplomacy in Kuwait with our fleet in Basra. Apparently, that's not the case now. We'll see why. But anyway, we're going to move the idea is we're going to kind of use the sort of Persian Gulf fleet to conduct naval displays in the Persian Gulf, with a view really to try and have some kind of impact on a colonial penetration in this region, with the hope that it may be witnessed and sort of convince local tribal leaders and so on and so forth of the omnipotence of the Ottoman Empire. But yeah, we still don't have the penetration required for formal colonial status in those regions. In any case, we don't have the capital or the diplomatic clout to push for it anyway for the time being. So, in the short term, we maintain our kind of defensive posture in central Bulgaria, looking to wear down Austrian forces. We are going to go ahead with a military plan in the campaigning season next year of landing a force. There's a couple of options here. One is the Dalmatian coastline. Spalato is a kind of part of their metropole. It's a kind of victory location, so holding that city will provide us with a kind of constant trickle of points, if you like, that puts us in a stronger position at the conference table. That can be linked up with an attack from Sofia through Niš, Zvornik and Sarajevo to provide us with a kind of land corridor, and that opens up options then for a campaign in the west, moving into central Hungary, or possibly a thunder run to Vienna. The other kind of possibility is, instead of going for Dalmatian coast, really, we land on the kind of Polar Peninsula and go for Trieste. The difficult thing with Trieste, it's a fortress, it would require assaulting, and it means that we have to land a significant force there, pretty much straight away. The advantage of the kind of top part, if you like, the kind of northern bend of the Adriatic, is it is just that much closer to Vienna. Now, the other possibility is we ignore Trieste, or indeed we land in Trieste, but we don't try and assault the fortress. We just bypass it. We push through Laibach, Graz, and into Vienna. We conduct a kind of thunder run. We'll probably need a really good commander for that. Someone like Hussein Avni, he's a fast mover, And that's a huge gamble. The idea is we're kind of gambling on the fact that the Austrians don't have much in the interior. For this to kind of come off would require a lot of stars to align, really. For one, the commander needs to be activated when they land on the kind of northern Adriatic coast. By the time the Austrians are aware, it might take them kind of time to move forces into place. So we would probably have a fortnight to a month really to pull this off, to conduct a forced march to Vienna, for Vienna to be largely undefended, and for an activated commander to prosecute an assault on Vienna. They would capture a significant amount of supplies, and of course capturing Vienna would be an absolute, sort of headshot for the Austrian Empire. It would result, we would hope, in a kind of significant collapse of the morale of their armed forces, this kind of thing. So this is another possibility for ending the war militarily. Again, it just requires an awful lot of stars to align. Now, one thing that we would do, whether we go with the Dalmatian, the slightly more passive offensive option, or we go with the kind of northern Adriatic option and the Thunder Rods of Vienna, whatever the weather, about a month prior to the landing, so as the landing, the task force is kind of assembled in Smyrna, we conduct an offensive, really, looking to push Constanta. This is essentially a feint, but it has to be prosecuted in a way that really functions to create a kind of vacuum here that will draw in Austrian forces. If the Austrian losses are substantial enough, they typically pour forces into this position, and that's the idea, is to create as much distance, really, between the lion's share of the Austrian field command and their capital. Now, we don't know the extent of the forces that the Austrians maintain in their interior. That's the kind of fly in the ointment. And of course, if it's 200,000-300,000 men in Vienna, we wouldn't have enough to force that position. If they're defeated in the field, we then have an army command, or maybe two, in the middle of the Austrian Empire with nowhere to fall back to, limited supplies, and possibly they face the prospect of being completely destroyed. If it comes off, it's a huge gamble. We've seized Vienna for the second time in the 19th century, the second time in our history, and that would, sure enough, create the conditions for, at the very least, a white peace, or probably something more than that. So we need to, we've got a bit of time. It's early November. We've got sort of, 5 months, maybe 3 to 6 months, I'd say, to plan this out. And of course, we've already outlaid a significant amount of resources for the construction of a large transport fleet. And that's a huge kind of construction project, and it's going ahead. It's going ahead really, really well. We've also got an expansion of the merchant marine with a view in the short term to beef up our merchant presence in the Mediterranean, because they're going to be lifting supplies into the Adriatic to support whatever landing we make here. So the 7th Army is going to be earmarked really for it, the force that we're going to assemble around Salonika. And who we give that command to, I don't know. A lot of it's going to depend on the arithmetic of our lift capacity. If a lift capacity is sufficient, we might even use Hussein Avni's command, something like that. But we need to think on it. We need to think on it and plan it out. But I think it's definitely going to go ahead. We've already outlaid a huge amount of resources. I mean, not that we should pursue a sunk cost fallacy, but we've expanded our kind of heavy lift capacity to a huge extent. It's definitely doable. Right, militarily, there's nothing that we're going to do in the Balkan Peninsula for the time being. We're going to hold a defensive posture. My thinking is we'll probably be looking at another significant battle in Sofia, and on the back of that, we will then be looking to conduct counter-offensives with activated commanders, but perhaps not just yet. There is a temptation to try and press north into Varna with Hussein Avni. The thing is, we don't know the disposition of Austrian forces to the rear. That's the problem. We don't know what, for example, this commander Clam Gallas is supported by. So we hold a defensive posture for the time being. And I think that's all we can do, really. Trade has been set, I believe. Exports have been set for the turn. I'm going to check through them really quickly, make sure that I haven't kind of missed anything. Nothing missed there. And assets balance looks good. Let's look at gold really quickly. So Colombia is the biggest exporter of gold. Chesapeake Bay also. Well, a lot of demand at Chesapeake Bay. South Andes. And Brazil. Let's look at Chesapeake Bay really quickly. The idea is we just want a trickle of gold into the economy, really. We'll see what happens with that. We don't have any trade agreements with the United States or anything like that, but we'll see what happens. If it doesn't come off, we'll start offering a premium. But for the time being, we'll offer kind of standard price for 2 units per turn. And if that comes off, that will be a kind of, that could be a permanent arrangement. We'll look to stockpile maybe 50 to 100 units of gold. That's a huge amount, a huge gold reserve, really, that we can kind of fall back on for a rainy day, and also cover some of the increased costs that we might be looking at because of the economic crisis. So we don't have much private capital to do anything really in the short term. Bayezid is on his way through Suez to Aden, and then we've got the teeth arms of the 7th Army sitting in Alexandria. That's pretty much it. There's nothing else that we can really do in the short term. First Trade Union Congress has happened, so there are ramifications, of course, becoming an industrial power, and that will have consequences, I'm sure, in years to come. Just checking kind of economic indices again. Yeah, decent kind of decent domestic market sales despite the economic crisis. We'll keep an eye on that though and see what kind of happens. Okay, nothing else to really kind of do there. Let's check what our colonial options are. So we've got a mission. I'm kind of tempted. It just seems completely pointless playing anything. But I'll tell you what, let's get a military outpost. A mission. And what's the cost? $12 turns. Prosecute a military expedition in Sano as well. Okay, let's look at some options to drive up colonial penetration in the Hejaz. We'll leave it at there. That's pretty much it for this turn. Yeah, no kind of aggressive moves or anything like that. Again, we're looking to just kind of maintain our position in the Balkan Peninsula for the time being. We will look to kind of deal with the situation in Salonika at some point. But the hope here is the Austrians push our position hard, and that gives us what we want, really, which is a significant military victory. We're going to set all of our forces to hold at all cost. And if we can wear Austrian forces down along this position, these commands can all support each other, which is a crucial thing. Plus, in Sofia, we have additional forces. So we have... What has just happened there? Okay. Yes, we've got some Hungarians, Ukrainians, Poles still in Abdul Karim's force, we've got Abdi Pasha, plus we've got an Italian force which has just arrived. Yeah, plus the garrison force. Okay, good. That's it. Early November. Going to put you on pause past turn, and we'll pick up in late November. See you on the other side. Okay, welcome back then. Late November 1862, and relatively quiet round again in the greater scheme of things. The economic crisis has spread then to France and the UK, Spain, Tuscany, Württemberg, Colombia, Moldavia, and not Austria yet, I don't believe. Let's check their national morale. Their national morale is sitting at 93. We get a national morale point from another engagement outside Sofia. It's a defensive kind of action. We inflict 25,000 casualties, take 13,000. Austrian forces are still there, and they're trying to kind of reinforce a bit of a position in Sofia. They're still trying to push it, but you can see that they're a little bit cautious. They're holding forces back. They're not fully committing, and they're kind of testing the waters. But their defeat was significant enough that they lost a national morale point, and they've lost about 50,000 of this force in the last month that they've pressed into Sofia. The really damaged force that was besieging Salonika, that detached what appears to be a marine division, sent it through Kavala, that is now besieging Adrianople to the rear. So this damaged force in the rear, it's being disruptive for the most part, I think we can say. Mehmed Ali's force now is in pretty good shape. He's received replacements. He's not activated, but we are going to set him to a defensive posture outside. And let's have a look and see whether Namik. So Namik Pasha is activated. We're going to detach him then from the main force, set him to an offensive posture, and he's going to look to really just secure the ground around Adrianople, sort of with Mehmed Ali's force. That should really kind of deal with this marine division. And then once Mehmed Ali is activated, we will look to basically push through Kavala and ultimately finish the kind of job at Salonika. And for the time being, again, just hold our position, sort of hold our central Hungarian hedgehog position for the time being. Now, one of the army corps arrived in Sofia. We're going to attach that. Let's have a look. One infantry corps, reserve, fortress troops, Italian corps that's being constructed. Here we go. And we're going to attach that to Abdul Karim's force. That's good. And we'll keep that force set to a defensive posture for the time being. Good. Now we should have a third corps that is now for the most part complete in Sinop. No, it's still being constructed. Okay, fine. Let's see what military control is like. We should have sufficient military control to get this cavalry division transported. And this is the cavalry division that's basically going to be joining the 6th Army. Let's see if we can get rail points. So a little bit of a risky run, that one, but we're going to get these guys in Sofia. Again, that cavalry division will be joining Abdul Karim Nadir's force, along with the Teeth Arms. Let's see what else is here. Ah. Yeah, we don't have enough rail points for this force. Let's quickly change this and see what we can attach to the cavalry division. We still have rail points. Why is this happening? That's the limit that we can fit them. Okay, that's good. And the next turn, we'll send the supply train and the remaining artillery. Now, one thing I did do, actually, that I didn't mention, is detach some artillery to send down to join Mehmed Ali's force. I detached this from Ahmed Pasha's command. Here we go. Just figured Mehmed Ali actually had an additional command point. Obviously, he has more now because we detached the Imperial Guard. So it made sense to just beef up his force a little bit and have a more even distribution of our firepower. Now we actually have room enough. Let's have a look. 5. How many points? How many command points goes into a cavalry division? 5. That's interesting. So we have command points enough to add a cavalry division to Ahmed Pasha's force, and possibly some others. No. Yeah, and routes of patches. So we're going to begin the construction of a couple of cavalry divisions, I think, soon. Just looking to kind of make as much use of our command point allotment as possible to beef up our forces, using either firepower, which is to say indirect fire, artillery, sort of regiments, and cavalry, which gives them a more reconnaissance, but more of a mobile element. The only army that has 2 cavalry divisions was traditionally Omar Pasha's force, which was the first force that we kind of created. He had enough command points to have that, but he didn't really have any independent artillery. The only artillery he had was always basically support artillery that existed inside his core forces. Okay, let's have a quick look at Aden. Okay, good. So Bayezid has arrived. We're going to send him on a bit of a risky mission north. In fact, let's see what we're going to do. We're not going to do that. We're going to detach a cavalry division. We're going to send a cavalry division south. Yeah, and we're going to look to give the cavalry division to Bayezid Pasha. And then we'll kind of move him north with a force, if you like. The cavalry division may even be able to sort of retake Aden, because it doesn't appear as though there are any Yemeni forces here now. They seem to have kind of fled to the west, the Hadramut. Now, one thing we are going to do is we do have the remainder of our surface fleet in Constantinople. We're going to conduct first of all a naval combat patrol to the Ionian Sea, and then we'll look to eventually get into the trade box and to use that force to provide an escort role. The other half of our surface fleet is sitting in the northern Adriatic on a defensive posture, really to provide reconnaissance and just to blockade Austrian ports, which they're doing successfully. So we're happy with that. Let's kind of quickly check Tobruk again to see if it's still blockaded. Yeah, it's still blockaded. I'll tell you what, let's do something else then. The buggy interface, or the clunky kind of interface of this game sometimes is mind-bendingly frustrating. It's unreal. Okay, there we go. Cool, 10 days to Tobruk. Fine. Let's check the transport fleet. So, what we have built has a lift capacity of 152. Plus what we've already had, which is 92. So it's about 240 something, 245. The lift capacity for a typical army, required to lift a typical army, is, let's have a look at Abdi Pasha's force, is not visible. I'm sure it is because I've read it here before. Wait, 274, right at the bottom. Abdul Karim's force is different because it's kind of not, it's partially constructed sort of thing. Yeah. So around 260, 270, that's the lift capacity we want to lift a fairly standard, which I think we're going to do. We're going to move one of the big armies to either Spalato or Trieste. Now we can see that the Austrians do maintain a force in northern Italy, which will likely respond to any kind of landing in the northern Adriatic. But it's not a long march, is it? If we landed, for example, at like Fiume or Udine, I think it's Friuli actually, it's not a long march. I mean, off season it would be a little bit longer, but obviously we'll be looking to land in May, something like that. It's not a long march at all. Actually, Fiume is here. We could even theoretically land Fiume here, and then march north from here. If it came off, it would be absolutely sensational. But yeah, we'll continue kind of cultivating that plan, having a think about, you know, at some point we can't do both. At some point we'll either decide to land on the Adriatic coast at Spalato, hold that position, liberate sort of Sarajevo, but ultimately what will happen, of course, is Austrian forces will begin to filter through. At one point they had not insignificant forces in Belgrade that we could see. We can't see any now, it doesn't mean they're not there. Let's see what we've got in Sarajevo. Well, not much from what we can see. Okay. So the only thing we're going to be looking to do really in late November in the European theatre is to clear the area around Adrianople. And then on the back of that, the hope is Mehmed Ali will be activated. We will then look to conduct an offensive through Kavala and then lift for the last time, we hope, the siege at Salonika. Yeah, that's pretty much it. And yeah, just hold the defensive position for now. We want to kind of really inflict a much more kind of convincing defeat on the Austrians, really, in kind of central Bulgaria before we look to continue prosecuting a counter-offensive. We've got all the defensive advantages. We hold kind of good ground. Weather's starting to get sort of a little bit dicey now. Heavy rainfall over Sofia. Not so bad in Rumelia. The Eastern Balkans. The weather is still fairly clement. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Our moves in Aden have been conducted. Let's quickly check out other reports. Okay. Yeah, so 1 national morale from battles. Prestige gained. The good thing is we're looking like we can utilize our entire lift capacity in the Mediterranean now. So whatever interdiction was happening, whatever kind of disruption of commercial shipping in the Mediterranean, it appears to have come to an end. It may have been more Egypt and Austria, or it may have been the Austrian force that we actually zeroed in and sunk. I mean, we destroyed an Austrian raiding force in the Adriatic. Perhaps that was the force that was the kind of most disruptive one, you know. The economy is not a great round economically. One of the poorest rounds we've seen in a while. So we are seeing a little bit of a kind of slowing down of growth. Domestic market sales 645. That's the lowest we've seen them in a while. And yeah, I mean exports are picking up a little bit, but still fairly kind of anemic. Sort of economic activity to be expected in the midst of an economic crisis. I've just realised I've neglected to set my exports, so look away now. One of the problems, of course, with the philosophy of Plevna, the siege at Salonika and the capture of Kavala, is that is the lion's share of our tobacco, or there's a lot of our tobacco growing kind of territory, so we need to kind of rectify this for our economy. Okay, that's a kind of export set, I think, for the most part. Yeah, that looks kind of reasonable. Okay, let's check our assets balance. Now, did we import any gold? No. We'll keep the request placed for the time being, but yeah, demand sort of far outstrip supply. But at some point, we will maybe sort of offer a premium and look to start hoovering up a gradual trickle of gold from the world market. This might increase once the American Civil War finishes, which I believe it's probably near kind of completion. Yeah, the Confederacy is pretty much just a sort of it's Florida, isn't it? I suppose New Orleans. A far quicker war than the Scandinavian War, which continues to go on. Although this looks like it's probably just an occupation and insurgency. It looks like that kind of Norway has gone to kind of Prussia, Sweden to Russia. Although I'm not sure if either of these powers have claims on these territories, so I don't know what their intention is. We'll have to keep an eye on that. Let's check the rest of our reports really quickly. Okay, that's pretty much it. Just going to check our diplomatic relations, make sure that I haven't missed any reports. None to reply to. Okay. Okay, I think that's it. We're in late November. We'll pass the turn and pick up in early December. See you on the other side. Okay, welcome back then. Yeah, early December 1862. Another pretty sedate round, actually. Let's have a look through the reports. I mean, no significant kind of action at all. Our naval patrols did detect a cruiser division, so these would be frigates and corvettes, this kind of thing, managed to slip through and get into Trieste. And we have a bit of intelligence in terms of what's in the harbour. So this is the cruiser division that snuck in. Yeah, we'll hold our position here, blockading, and the idea is that maybe we can catch them on the way out, but they kind of ran the gauntlet. We're sat outside to Brook, and we can't see anything. We spotted some American ships. We're not at war with the United States, so they wouldn't be blockading to Brook. So we're going to just hold this position for the time being, I think, look to kind of intercept anything that passes through for the next fortnight. It may be that some very small sort of Austrian forces, maybe simply just one corvette squadron or something like that, is sitting outside Tobruk. It's the only thing I can imagine, really. Other than that, yeah. In terms of Europe, so Namik Pasha's, the Guard Corps for Namik Pasha, didn't really make contact with the Marines. It looks like they fell back to Kavala, and the force besieging Salonika has detached a force into Kavala. This is a damaged corps. It looks like it's Poles, and that's sitting inside the town at Kavala. Mehmed Ali Pasha is not activated again this turn. What we're actually going to do is we're going to press Namik Pasha's Guard Corps into Kavala, but we're going to follow him with the main body of the force, which is not activated and set to a defensive posture. That's the plan, I think. We'll conduct a sustained attack into the region and then set ourselves up to besiege that corps that is sitting inside the town. This could benefit us. That would help destroy that corps, and then sort of touch wood if Mehmed Ali is activated next turn, we'll refuse Namik Pasha's Guard Corps with the main command and then press into Salonika. Because this force in the south is isolated, it's at partial strength, it's struggling to supply itself, I would have thought. And it's not really doing much more than being an irritant, but we want to kind of deal with this. It is impacting our economy, incidentally. It's easy to think that the war isn't impacting our economy, because we've seen sort of fairly sustained growth, but you know, some of the most one of the biggest coal mining regions in our empire is Niš, which has been occupied by the Austrians for some time, which means that we have to import coal, and this is impacting fairly significantly with the fall of Plevna, our tobacco production. More than half of our tobacco production has been reduced by more than 50% in the last month alone on the basis of this, and that is beginning to kind of tell. So yeah, the urgency really is to kind of wrap up the situation in the south, and just to hold a defensive posture. The Austrians have pressed more forces into their kind of position around Sofia, or in Sofia district around the city. We still maintain 3 army commands sitting outside Sofia, not engaged this time, so this time they were just sitting on a defensive posture. Maybe the commander wasn't activated, maybe he was, but they just chose not to press an attack. What they have done is push further forces down into Plevna. Good chance they have something like 750,000 men, something like that now, a fairly substantial force. The force that is in Varna could not support an offensive into Sofia, which is key. So their force is partially divided, but that's something Edward von Klamgalas is controlling their left flank, if you like. The key thing is we hold our nerve, we hold a defensive posture, we ensure, what we've really been looking to do is to ensure the fallout from the death of Omar Pasha isn't disrupting things too much in Europe, is to be a little bit cautious, a bit conservative, and hold our position whilst we kind of mop up the situation in the rear for the time being. What we are going to do is to detach the transport fleet in Smyrna, which has had a bit of time to recover. We're going to send this force then to Alexandria. 13 days, and look to bring back the remainder of what was the 7th Army, probably to Smyrna. In terms of Sofia, let's have a look now. We've transported a cavalry division. Let's remove this Polish corps, put that back inside the fortress. And so it's Abdulkarim's force. What have we got? Okay, so the 6th Army is starting to take shape. Yeah, it's starting to take shape. Let's have a look what else we can move. So we have the 3rd Corps for the 6th Army now complete in Sinop. And we have sufficient military control that we can still transport using the rail line to Sofia. That's still connected. So we're going to do that. 7 days. That's good. And that pretty much completes, for the most part anyway, the 6th Army. That's a shame we don't have the rail points. After that, we'll basically bring the supply train and, yeah, 1 regiment of artillery comprised of 2 battalions to Sofia, and that is the 6th Army basically. Yeah, the 6th Army complete. Yeah, that's pretty much it really. The only thing is we're going to try and press and roll up this situation in the south, so re-secure northern Greece, and bring the rest of our forces from Alexandria back. Let's really quickly check Yemeni pirates here. Okay. So let's look to sortie the Persian Gulf Fleet. Okay, cavalry division is almost 2 days. And they have a force there also. Well, Bayezid Pasha's in theatre, but we really want to make sure that we kind of... there'll be a brief overlap period where we'll have both commanders in Aden. We're going to have to do that just to re-secure, I think, the line. Well, we have to retake Aden itself, for one. And, yeah, to re-secure the line up to Sanaa. The actual town Aden has grown fairly significantly. It actually has eclipsed Sanaa now in terms of its size. So it's not just the colonial capital, it is the most populous. Yeah, it's the most populous kind of part of... What is this? It's confusing because we don't actually control the town. We don't appear to control the town. And yet on the surface there appears to be a garrison. Oh, it's the consulate garrison. So maybe we still control some very small part of the town, presumably the consulate. This is the kind of guard around it. A fortress battalion comprised of 400 men. Well, we definitely have to maintain our position in Sanaa for the time being to play out these kind of colonial cards. Talking of which, we've got some colonial merchants which we're going to play. So we're going to send some to Kuwait. Okay, yeah, Kuwait. Just a bit to drive up the colonial penetration around here. And what have we got? Local chief bribing. I don't think we'll do anything at Aden for the time being. And road network. Yeah, nothing else on that front for the time being. Now we do have sufficient private capital, and we've got a large stockpile of manufactured goods because we're frankly we're struggling to shift them on the world market. So what we are going to do, since we're in a position to, is to begin to push the line, the rail line south then through Bitlis into Mardin, and then I suppose next will be Mosul. We'll look to sort of construct the Mesopotamia line. We had intended to hold off on infrastructure projects, but because we're not really shifting any manufactured goods, it just means... Yeah, that's good. It just means that we actually have sufficient sort of sitting, if you like, in our inventory stock that we can stock inventory that we can use it for infrastructure. We can see that the economy then, domestic market sales have sort of sagged significantly, and exports remain well below what they were probably a year ago. So this economic crisis is more noticeable for sure. For us, we're looking at mostly slowed growth as opposed to really kind of recession or any real economic contraction. But like but we were one of the fastest growing economies in the world, so that's to be expected. Yeah, it's noticeable. Exports have been set. Just checking exports, make sure I haven't missed anything. Yeah, that's good. And just want to double check the assets balance really quickly. Average national satisfaction has declined a little bit for about 3 or 4 points. We've not managed to import any gold yet. Let's really quickly check the regional census, make sure there's no strikes or demonstrations. No, I mean, large parts of... We're looking at sort of indifference with some areas of popular enthusiasm, but nothing to be too kind of concerned about. Literacy sitting at 15%. Militancy's climbing at this at 64. Okay, I think that's probably it. Let's just check through the rest of the reports. So we've just got sort of now what is interesting is Prussia has just promised local support to Austria. I don't think that gives them a casus belli against us, but if anyone declares war on Austria now, they'll have Prussia to contend with as well. That's interesting. We have to kind of keep that in mind. Yeah, I can't see anything else in the reports that's to be of any kind of concern. We did have a small revolt, but it was instantly put down by a colonial fort in Dubai. Yeah, nothing else significant then. So the main thing is we send the transport fleet, look to pick up the rest of our boys in Alexandria, bring them back. Hopefully we'll be in a position to land them at Salonika, because it'd be nice to maintain a decent force there. Hopefully by then, Nepan Ali's force will be in Salonika and the siege would have been lifted. This force, the remnants of this force, this was initially a force of a good 150,000 men that broke through to get to Salonika, moved all the way to Adrianople, was defeated, Gallipoli, and it's actually 2 forces. It's the remnants of 2 army commands. Each were about 100,000, 100 to 150,000 each. It's fairly significant, this. Austrian national morale is at 93, combat power 317. Yeah, that's it. I've got to really quickly check what the operational costs are for the economy. They're at 350, so we should have sufficient. I mean, the structure expenses, the operational cost for our economy increased fairly significantly in the last sort of 3 or 4 years. That's it then. So yeah, again, pretty sedate round this. It's sort of the Austrians have been quite cautious. So the war, it looks like it's kind of settled into a bit of a stalemate in central Bulgaria, whilst we try and clear up the kind of situation in northern Greece, which I think we're going to be doing in short order. The Austrians, I think, are going to struggle to get through. We've got a really good position set up here, and it's really on the basis of a successful kind of defence against Austria that we want to use them as the basis for a counter-attack. We're going to be looking for kind of counter-punch position here, really. But in the meantime, let's look to press the position in Kavala, lift the siege. I'll put you on pause. We're in early December, and we'll pass turn and pick up in late December. See you on the other side. Okay, welcome back. Late December then, and yeah, the end of 1862, and it's looking like stalemate in Bulgaria. The Austrians pushed what looked to be a rather tentative sort of attack. That's not the one. That's the Battle of Kavala. In Sofia, but with reduced forces, and it looks like they've just fallen back to northern Bulgaria. And that pretty much seals the campaign for 62. What's really curious here is that Austrian forces are low on supply, and they sort of really shouldn't be there. There's a depot in Plevna, and in Bucharest, and in Constanta, Furthermore, Kronstadt is a +4 city, so that functions like a depot. So is Transylvanian or Schesburg. So is Klausburg. They should be able to trace supplies. It's not the first time that I've seen this. I'm wondering if this is kind of dictating the kind of tempo of their operations. It's not always the case. At times I've seen them fully supplied, try and press into central Bulgaria, but I mean, we can't see their supply, what their supplies are. They've probably got nearly 1 million men, I reckon, concentrated around Romania and northern Bulgaria, perhaps slightly less. I mean, a force that size does work for a lot of supplies. The other problem they have, of course, is the eastern part of the Austrian Empire is the least developed. You can see they have absolutely no railroads here, beyond the railroads that we've built that they've captured in both Plevna and Constanta. This is like their kind of Wild West. You know, it's a bit of a backwater. That does slow the transport of supplies. Having railroad access is a kind of zero-sum question in terms of moving supplies. The other thing, of course, is that Austria doesn't have much plant because of the last war, because of the kind of scorched earth that we conducted whilst campaigning through Austria. They don't have much in the way of factories that can produce supplies or ammunition. Now, they'll produce a small amount of guild base. They'll have very small manufactories, of course, in the background that will produce supplies and ammunition. In Trieste, they have a kind of a shipbuilding plant that will produce supplies also. But for a large army, that's probably not enough. Now, the other thing I've noticed, of course, when we look at the exports of supplies, the availability of supplies, and the assets balance, that's not supplies, it's manufactured goods. Now, it looks like it's opened up somewhat, but at one point it was only Britain and the United States, for the most part, France also now, that are producing supplies and ammunition. And there's quite a few customers, quite a lot of requests, and I've got a pretty good idea who one of those customers is going to be. They're going to be one of the biggest customers for importing supplies. That would make sense in terms of their supply situation seeming to exist in fits and bursts. That is to say, at times they seem to have huge forces with no issues drawing supplies at all. At other times they're struggling to nudge supplies down, suggesting just a lack of supplies, a general lack of supplies. And that, in conjunction, I think, with our kind of hedgehog in central Bulgaria, has served now to create a stalemate for the end of 62. Our operation into Kavala was a success. We pressed forward the Imperial Guard, of course, under Namik Pasha. He was followed by Mehmed Ali, the main force. Mehmed Ali is now activated, which is good to see. We'll fold Namik Pasha back into the... we'll give him the direct command of the Guard once again. Let's do this now before I forget. There we go. That's good. That means that a portion of that force, a non-insignificant portion, is now trapped and besieged inside Kavala, which is absolutely outstanding news. That force can now be systematically destroyed, and it will be. We're going to conduct an assault against Kavala town. That'll also restore to us the tobacco-producing region just outside the town and the district, and then we're well positioned to lift the siege at Salonika. There is no prospect of this force taking Salonika. Salonika is well supplied. It is a large fortress, so we have nothing to be anxious about there. And then that would pretty much wrap up the kind of the rearward campaign, the kind of the second tobacco belt campaign, and plants Mehmed Ali Pasha on the map as a sort of general in his own right, really. I mean, obviously he did that, I suppose, in the Egyptian campaign, but yeah, where to go from here? Now, our transport fleet in Constantinople is largely constructed. I've kind of sat down and kind of figured out the arithmetic. We're going to need to expand it a little bit more. Not much more, just a scooch. So we're going to look at sort of... we won't do it just yet, but it's going to be mostly, I think, steam river transports, paddle transports, and anything else, really, that we can use. It's not significant, but I think what we're going to do is lift one of our main armies. Instead of using the 7th Army, which has kind of been deconstructed, and that's going to be landed at Salonika, we're probably going to take Hussein Avenue. So once Mehmed Ali is done in Salonika, we'll get him up to take up a position on the right flank in Rumelia. That will relieve Hussein Avenue. We'll send him. We'll use Salonika as the staging point. And I think I've settled on a plan. It'll be the beginning of the campaigning season next year. We're not going to go with Dalmatia or Spilato. We're not going to go with Trieste. We're going to go with just in between. We're going to land a force just south of the Polar Peninsula, Fiume, and the idea is, obviously this does really require the stars to align to come off. We're going to conduct a forced march through Laibach, Marburg, into Vienna. Now, Hussein Avni is a fast mover. Of all the generals that we've got, even more so than Omar Pasha, actually, he's able to move forces much, much faster. He's very effective at organising his forces on the march. And yeah, that's going to be really, really critical. And him being activated is going to be critical. And the force leaving on time and not being tremendously delayed is going to be critical. There's all these stars need to align. Once he's at a Fiume, if he's activated, he should be able to reach Vienna within a fortnight. We might force march him to do that. The idea is clear weather. We bypass the towns. We don't look to assault it. We look to assault it once we're positioned there. And if we can pull that off, that would end the war in 1863, I think. And it could even be sensational. They have large forces, but if their morale collapses, their national morale kind of bottoms out, it would then make their larger forces much more manageable in this area. We can begin to roll them up, push them into Transylvania, detach a force, and conduct an operation into Bosnia, and all this sort of thing. You know, it really open up options for, a really committed offensive campaign. So that's going to be the plan for 63. You know, there's a few details that need ironing out. The big construction program of the transport fleet is almost complete. Real testament to our industrial clout that we pulled that off. We've put in a huge amount of state resources into that. State resources that are now we've recouped, which is good to see. And it didn't take a really, really long period of time. It happened relatively quickly. I mean, we pretty much had, I don't know, it's almost 100 ships. Some of them quite large as well. I mean, some of them probably more than 100 ships. I mean, the largest steam transports is, 3 ships per flotilla? Plus lots of kind of smaller paddle kind of squadrons. Plus, of course, we've got the merchants that are being constructed as well, that are also nearing completion. So, quite a feat, quite a construction feat, quite an effort, and that's going to be set to pay off next year. In the short term, it's just a case of retaking Kavala, really, between now and sort of January, and then pushing up to clear the area around Salonika. And probably the force that's besieging Salonika is sufficiently damaged that I would calculate that an engagement would probably destroy that force entirely, I think. It wouldn't surprise me at all if that were the case. Transports, this was our formerly, the existing transport fleet that we had, are almost at Alexandria. Heavy weather in the Mediterranean is slowing down the progress. We have to keep that in mind. If we're struggling to get ships from sort of Smyrna to Alexandria, what does that mean for like a landing all the way up here? We might have to really plan it out. And what state is the force going to be in when it lands in Trieste? How disorganized is it going to be? It's all these things, that are sort of almost out of our control, really. If it really comes off, if the Austrians have got most of their force, we see the emergence of another force. This looks like it's a kind of a logistics force. There's a lot of supply forces here. Not a huge amount in terms of teeth arms. The forces at kind of Slavonian is the most worrying for the operation, because they would have time to react, and in clear weather they could march through Western Hungary and get to Vienna quite quickly. But the idea is a month beforehand, a month before we even set sail, we begin to put real pressure. We begin to get really aggressive in eastern Romania, sort of the Black Sea coast. Begin to really press the Austrians hard here, and that should create a vacuum. That's the idea. It should draw these forces away from the west, and that means the landing will have even more of an impact. It means they'll have to double back on themselves, and there is a force in Italy. Doesn't look like it's a significant force, but that, of course, that could march north fairly quickly. That's why I'm thinking, well, we do want to go for Vienna, but it makes sense to go the kind of east side of Trieste, because this force would, of course, begin to march, and they could force march. They've got rail links also from Verona. Do they have rails? No, they don't have rails in Udine. So there's a major road there. I don't think they have continuous major roads. So they don't have rail access from Italy to Vienna, which makes it difficult for them to strategically redeploy forces. Their railroads in Hungary go as far south as Sombor. It's double check that. You can't always see railroads on the map, of course. Yeah, it's far southeast of Sombor, which is just north of Belgrade. So they really only need to get forces here, and then they can train them up, put them on trains, and sort of move them up to Vienna. But yeah, that's it. Another slow round economically. I mean, the economic crisis is much more pronounced than the last one. I think exports are picking up now, though. We're starting to shift to manufactured goods, which is good to see. Textiles have picked up, as has tobacco exports. So exports are beginning to climb again. Yeah, back up to like 2, 3, 4, 82 units shifted. Domestic market sales still declining. So that's obviously of some concern. Short-term phenomenon, I think. But yeah, not good. Not good at all. In terms of other combat reports then, so Beyazid Pasha then has resecured the port of Aden for us, which is good. I say the port of Aden. The port itself was destroyed, torched by the rebels. We captured a light artillery regiment from them. But yeah, we're going to now have to plough some resources. This light artillery regiment, before I forget, we're actually just going to move it to the European theatre. Because it's surplus to requirements, I think, in Aden. We'll move it to Adrianople, 35 days, there we go. So yeah, the situation is kind of stabilised on the south coast then of the Arabian Peninsula. Now, where am I going? But nothing to be done in the short term. Zarif Mustafa Pasha has to hold tight. He's not activated in any case, and we've got a lot of colonial infrastructure going in Sana. I'm always really reluctant to do this because, like, in 6 months' time, what is this? 100 private capital and maybe 100 state revenue down the toilet, and it happens continuously every 2 or 3 months. It's really, really tedious, and I don't know why I keep doing it. But the problem is, these are the things that are required to lower the kind of revolt risk. It's a kind of catch-22. We have to hurl in the resources, press the revolt risk down. It might be worth actually just sacrificing Sana, moving back to Aden, keeping our forces here, and just keep playing those, build Aden up, then do it, tile by tile. That might be the way to do it. We actually might. Part of the problem is that we have a very limited force here. It's like what, 15,000 plus 2,000 something, 3,000 horse. It's a very small force, really, and probably what we're doing is overextending it a little bit. That said, I can't really do that now because I've already invested everything in Sana, and our maritime access route is really going to be through Aden. So, yeah, anyway. Part of me thinks that stick a port back in. We are reconstructing the... why can't I just select the town? No. Computer says no. I just wanted to see this, what you have in there. I mean, we have a depot we can actually see just by hovering. We don't need the picture. We've got a consulate being reconstructed, 15 days. Depot, size 2 depot. The port was destroyed, as was the fortress, as was the smaller colonial fort out in the district. Shame. Real shame. One thing that we can play, which is short term, is gunboat diplomacy card. Excuse me. Now, what does that give us? Gunboat diplomacy is 15 state revenue. It's very short term. Changes colonial penetration by 2% with a maximum of 25. Has 10% chance to trigger revolt in the region. Will change -1 the revolt base value of the region with a minimum of 50. So I could just sit this fleet off the coast of Aden and continuously basically conduct gunnery displays, occasionally shell locals, I suppose. And on that basis, that should drive down the revolt risk in Aden. Gunboat diplomacy with the kind of local tribes, the local kind of belligerent tribes anyway. And if I sit to a defensive posture, we're not actually kind of using up any organisation or anything like this. That might be the way forward. It's something that's cheap, it's cost effective, and yeah, using the fleet in this way actually, it's worth doing this. We can't get a clear picture on the revolt risk entirely because we have units there, but yeah, we have to kind of await events a little bit. The Yemenis have, gathered another reasonable sized force in Hadramaut. There's a good chance they might move down. We'll keep Bayezid Pasha, I think, to probably defensive posture, defend and then retreat. So kind of break off, basically, conduct a bit of a defense and then pull back. That's pretty much going to be it, I think, for this video. It's late December, so kind of I will also pass turn, and the next video will begin in January, because the intensity of the war has momentarily subsided, where it has for the last few months. Stalemate is kind of set in, and really all we're going to be doing in the next fortnight is conducting an assault on Kavala and looking as our economy gradually becomes worse and worse, as our domestic market sales begin to taper off. But yeah, decent enough recovery from obviously the absolute catastrophe of losing our greatest general. A difficult time, it's been a difficult couple of months, and we've kind of seen it through. The Austrians, not able to really capitalise it in any way at all, not able to really change the kind of game on the ground, despite the fact that they have brought significant forces to bear. So we'll leave there in late December in Stalemate and pick up in early January 1863. Thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.